Dungeons or rifts? What is the better choice for Diablo 4? Now, for a few weeks I've been playing Diablo 3 because of a new season and a friend wanted me to play, so why not? But these rifts that you go through time and time again in Diablo 3, they quickly become quite boring, even with the randomness. The randomness is the enemies and location. Now, that is fine. When I first encountered them, I thought, nice, good. I barely need to leave town. I can just enter here, get a bunch of loot. If my inventory gets full, I go back to town, salvage, go back in, get more loot, kill the boss, get some things hopefully, and then I go back. But then I started thinking, yeah, I know, thinking. The thing that ruins everything. But I started thinking, and I thought, this isn't very fun. The randomness is boring. Well, it became boring. Sooner or later you come to a point where the random rifts are like, click, enter, kill, 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 click, oh crap, I died, resurrect, click, kill, 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 oh last boss, kill, 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 kill. Dead, in, done, been there, done that, take me home. Now, but I also played some games with dungeons, like World of Warcraft, Neverwinter, and Star Wars The Old Republic. And I started thinking, how about dungeons in Diablo 4? And this seems to be the way that Blizzard is taking Diablo 4. They have written in one of their articles, I would say, the part 1, I'll link that in the description. It says keyed dungeons. They don't explain exactly what keyed dungeons are, except that they're spread out in the world, most of them, and that you can get to see what enemies you're about to face, and that you can strategize your approach to this dungeon, so on. And that sounds cool, but is this the way? Is this the way to go with dungeons in Diablo 4? Now, why would dungeons be a better option than rifts? To me, the rifts are in Diablo 3 implemented into the story in a somewhat of a good way. It's a bit hasty, and quite frankly, it sounds kind of stupid because in the story, in the lore, the rifts are like training grounds for Nephilim, the child of both angel and demons. And that's fine, training grounds, fine, nice, cool. But these training grounds are very hard, and as the one who opens the rift, ARREAT, even he says that many Nephilim have perished going through these. I mean, what the hell? Training grounds that he opens, a portal that leads to a random place with random enemies, taken from your own memories or mind, and then you die, or possibly die. It doesn't make sense, especially since you, the player, can die so many times and just go up again. But excuse the part about, I mean, if you die, it's not a hardcore, so going up again, reviving, I mean, that doesn't really matter, but I think rifts as a training ground just doesn't make sense, because they're very difficult, and that is part of the experience, of course. If you're gonna train and doing it against enemies who are strong and can kill you, that is a good, well, I would say incentive to live, so you would do your best. But it doesn't make sense in the terms of training, because training doesn't really require you to survive as well. Not in the way of... It's more of a survival ground, I think. Anyway, moving past rifts now, as for the lore. Dungeons in lore makes more sense because they could be implemented into where you someone asks you for help, and to help you need to go down these stairs or go into that cave, and in that cave there are a bunch of enemies on the way, and then you face the final boss, who is the one you want killed, or the person you want to help. The person who needed your help want that boss killed, or maybe that boss stole some supplies and the supplies are furthest in where the boss is. That makes more sense in the lore. And yes, I do care about the lore because I have read all the 3 books about Diablo. Or all 3. I read 3 books about Diablo, the Book of Cain, Book of Tyrael, and Book of ARREAT. Now these books are great. I might do a video on them. But as for back to dungeons being better, as I said, they could be implemented into the lore better because they could be made a story with them, which is a bit more satisfactory in that aspect. As for loot, loot can also, of course, drop from every enemy in that dungeon, as well as the rifts. Now, what I was thinking about when I thought about this was World of Warcraft, the Old Republic, and Neverwinter mostly have smaller bosses on the way to the big bad boss in the end. Now, these smaller bosses also serve a purpose in that story, which is great. But it could also make Diablo 4 a bit too much like an MMO, maybe? Or like the Division or Destiny, which is... I read about Diablo 4 and it sounds like it's open world with other players running around. And I'm not 100% sure about that, how I feel about that, because that would feel too much like World of Warcraft or Division, or no, maybe not Division, because there you run around alone unless you play in group or in the hub, but like Destiny 2. But the dungeons are spread out in the world. That is great, and that makes me think that they will be part of a story. I don't know why they are called keyed dungeons. There's some kind of other dungeons also mentioned, but I hope that they implement it good in the lore. As for enemies, I think there should be enemies, of course, on the way, but the enemy count and the enemy location in the dungeon, should they be fixed or random? Personally, I think they should be random, because that would make things more interesting. Each time you enter, it would be a little bit different. The layout, well, the layout could have some few random elements to it, but the environment, as for the location, the environment, the surrounding environment, should be the same. Like if you enter a cave, it's always a cave you enter into. You don't go down into a cave and then enter a desert. Or you go up a few, or maybe you go into a swamp and suddenly you're in a castle or something like that. That doesn't make sense. For you to enter a castle, you need to enter a castle to do that castle dungeon. Now, as for the enemies, they should also be fixed. The enemy type should be fixed. If someone wants a shaman boss dead, the enemies on the way should be fallen or related to that shaman's specific demon race or beast race or whatever they are. Like maybe it's a goat shaman, so the enemies on the way should be goatmen, spearmen, and goatmen with axes and smaller goatmen, shamans, and so on and so forth. But the locations of the enemies in the dungeon should possibly be random, just to mix things up. And as you can, I think that when Blizzard says that you can strategize your approach to the dungeon, it talks about the equipment you have and the abilities you use, and not how you're supposed to attack a specific enemy, which one you take first, because just go all in, I think, will be the answer to that one. But I do think that some bosses should have a mechanic to them that maybe you need to do something to be able to damage them, or something like that, because it becomes very boring to just hammer down on bosses and just avoid their attacks. It shouldn't be like, oh, this boss now uses a laser that you need to stand in this location to maybe avoid it. Well, that could be one thing, but it shouldn't be a laser that you go through and you can't avoid it. You just need to run around in a circle. That's just boring, honestly. Have it so that the laser comes out and maybe you need to stand behind a pillar or something to avoid it, or something. Maybe a specific part is shielded because of some wizard that came with you who can shield you against it. I don't know, something like that. But the boss should have some kind of element to them that makes them unique to other bosses that you will face, not just the abilities. I mean, raining down a meteor from the sky, I mean, that's fine if several bosses can do that. I'm fine with that. But they should still have mechanics to them that makes them unique. Like maybe one have an ice meteor, and one has a earth meteor, and fire meteor, and lightning meteor, and so on. It should be something that makes them unique, not just a name and story, but also what they do. Now, as for the difficulty of the dungeons, they should be, of course, affected by the difficulty of playing it, because I'm guessing Diablo 4 will have like Diablo 2 and Diablo 3, where you can choose your difficulty, depending on what you think you can do or can take, what difficulty you can do, like Torment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 16, or normal, expert, hard, so on. So that should of course affect the dungeon. Now my question is, if I play at Torment, let's say Torment is a difficulty in Diablo 4, if I play at Torment, will the other players that I face, or meet rather, are they also at Torment difficulty, or are they at a lower difficulty? So will the difficulty be more attuned to the player himself? So if I play a Torment, I damage an enemy in one way, and someone who plays at a lower difficulty but with me still does the same amount of damage, even though they have less or worse equipment or lower level. Like we both do the same amount of damage on an enemy, but we still play at different difficulties, and he gains maybe 10 XP and I get 15. But as I'm higher level, I do need more XP, but I'm also playing at a higher difficulty, so I do get more XP for that. But as well as I think dungeons should be outside of that kind of but I also think dungeons should be able to be played solo. First of all, they should be able to be played with only you, so that you get to experience it. Because not everyone can play with friends, and maybe you want to do a dungeon, but you don't have any friends online, so hey, if you want to do the dungeon, go do the dungeon solo. Of course, this should be, maybe 4 or 5 players should be the max, and you get to go in, and with more players you have, the more difficult the dungeon is. And I'm wondering if 2 players play a Torment and 2 players play at maybe normal, should that be a factor in the dungeon? Well, that's very hard to say. I think no, because it would make things a bit unbalanced for both leveling and the lower leveled characters, because if we played at Torment difficulty with those who play at normal, they would not be able to kill anyone, but they would gain good XP if the ones who play at Torment can kill those enemies. They would level up very fast. Which is maybe a good thing for those who like the power level, of course. But if we play at normal, the Torment people who play at Torment, they will gain XP, but not much. And those who play at normal, well, they will have a normal run. Maybe, of course, the enemies will be a bit more difficult, because there are still 4 players who increase the damage of and health of all the enemies. So it will make a difference. But I still think dungeons is the way to go, because I feel dungeons could be made, or they could be implemented into the game in a much more fluidic way to make the game more fun and more, what's the word? Realistic, I guess? It would feel like the dungeons are there because they're there because of not just because of a mechanic that is required in the game, but also because of story and progression. Because of players want to feel something, not just because here's a mechanic and this is the way you get loot. Because that's basically what rifts and greater rifts are in Diablo 3. They're just loot machines, loot mechanics, basically. So I think dungeons is the way to go, but what do you guys think? Am I on the right track here, or am I just plattering on and no one understands what I'm saying? I've been Sweeping92, have a great life, and I hope to see you in future videos.